The current status in triple-negative breast cancer of what have been sort of the hottest investigations, specifically direct DNA damaging agents and PARP inhibition, are starting to bear fruit. What we know is that platinum-based therapies clearly are as good as taxanes in metastatic triple-negative breast cancer. In the neoadjuvant setting, they augment response to therapy if you add them to more conventional anthracyclines and taxanes. What we don't know is if they improve outcomes in the adjuvant setting. So that's something that we still need to find out. And I would say there's some trials that are going to answer that question directly. PARP inhibitors similarly have had a lot of data coming out in the germline BRCA associated setting. Outside of inherited breast cancer, it's a little less clear whether targeting DNA damage response specifically with PARP inhibitors, where that's going to lie. The challenge in triple negative in general for these strategies as well as the ones that are coming is that it's not a homogeneous entity. Triple negative is a very heterogeneous molecular entity. It's heterogeneous from the standpoint of immune activation, and so we now have learned that we need to take into account that heterogeneity and be a little more structured in the questions that we're asking. The challenge, of course, has been that like with everything else, there was a lot of enthusiasm and some early incredibly encouraging data that turned out to be not quite as encouraging as originally thought, particularly in the PARP inhibitor realm. But I mean, there's clearly interest, right? Because there's data that PARP inhibitors work in the inherited setting. There's emerging data that we may be able to strategically deploy them, particularly in combinations with chemotherapy. And platinums been around forever, and being able to utilize an existing well-known mechanism that's non-cross resistant with the other drugs we give is very appealing, and in the neoadjuvant setting it works. The question is, does that help with cure rate? And that's really where the questions still arise. Some of the new initiatives are trying to be really strategic about it, where there are two studies coming out of the NCI that are traditional cooperative group studies. One is going to look at the platinums, and the other is going to look at PARP inhibition in residual disease. So this is where the rubber really hits the road. You've got triple-negative breast cancer that's gotten conventional therapy, goes to surgery, and there's still cancer left, and we know that's a high-risk situation. And trials sort of that are then directed at that group of patients, I think are very exciting, because you're picking the resistant cancers and you're asking thoughtful questions. And there's two of those studies that are one's already open and the other one is coming. There's another element that's really important. The Carolina breast cancer study, the first iterations, we found that triple-negative breast cancer particularly afflicts young women with breast cancer and black women with breast cancer. And the most recent version, the phase 3, which differed in that it took a molecular approach to looking at this, has found that disparity in terms of the kind of cancer that women get is even greater than we appreciated. And so one of the things that I think is really important is that this is beyond just women with breast cancer. The fact is that understanding the targetability of triple negative and the subsets within the triple negative are particularly important for the groups with greatest need, young women and women of color.